joined by John Wu, president of Avax, and I do need to read some disclosures again. So let's get into it. This call is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be, nor should it be construed as or used as investment, tax, or legal advice, an investment recommendation, an IRA provider recommendation, or an offer to sell, or the solicitation of an offer to buy or sell any digital asset or security. Clients of Grayscale may maintain positions in the digital assets discussed on this call, and any opinions expressed through this webinar are only solely our own and do not necessarily express the views or opinions of Grayscale. So I think we're actually ready to jump into it this time. Let's get into it. So can you provide some background on yourself and how Avalanche came to be created? What is the
Sure,
problem
Ray.
that you're solving,
Absolutely.
trying to
And it's a
solve?
pleasure to be here. I'm president of Avax, the team behind Avalanche. I started my professional career actually probably not too dissimilar to most of your listeners right now. I was a traditional tech investor in traditional finance, working at some well-known funds, and I also ran my own fund. So, more interesting than that is I started buying Bitcoin in the early 2010s, the traditional on-chain way. I'm really excited to be here. I think the second part of your question was, what was the second part, Ray?
How did Avalanche become created, and what's the problem that you guys were looking to solve?
Mm. Well, let's start with the problem first. Back in the 2017-18 era, Dr. Eamon Gunseer, distributed systems professor at Cornell, realized that the Web3 ecosystem back then had some improvements that needed on the technology front, scale, security, as well as speed and cost, all of that. And Avalanche was born out of the computer science labs between Dr. Eamon Gunseer, I affectionately call him Gun, and his PhD students to solve some of that, as they called it, trilemma. And that's how Avalanche started. The funny thing about this is I had already decided to go all in on this space, and I thought this tokenization was still the most effective and efficient way to issue, own, and exchange value and assets. I was running a company elsewhere, and giving access to accredited investors the alternative assets. So I saw it from a business perspective, how the technology wasn't there, and Gun, from a technology perspective, saw it from a tech perspective. That was the problem it was solving back then. Call it 7-8 years ago now. Today, a lot of blockchains out there. The problem, I think, is the blockchains don't allow the clients to differentiate the needs of the client as well as the products that the developers are trying to create. There is one chain, one asset, then there is one chain, many assets. In real world, people actually need to have a customizable blockchain suited for their purposes. So if you're developing for a gaming company, it's different from developing for a traditional finance type of application. Those are differences. Avalanche is a network of blockchains. So it solves for the customizable part of blockchains.
Great. And I'm going to have you explain the blockchain trilemma in a little bit, because I think that's important philosophically. But first, I want to do my favorite question, which is, what is Avalanche and how does it work? Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Well, your audience is older than 5 years old. So I'm going to have to talk up to your audience, because my assumptions, they're very sophisticated if I know your audience. But Avalanche, and also Avalabs is the team and the people, the company, and it's a software services company. Avalanche is the blockchain, just so we know that. Basically, Avalanche allows developers and builders to create applications very easily and create their own desired applications. And it's done in a way that is, I would call it, horizontal scaling. And the best way to visualize that would be typical monolithic chains. Think of it as you're in New York City, Manhattan, and you live in one of these high towers and you rent an apartment. And most of these apartments are very cookie cutter. They have a kitchen here, they have 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom, and it's either L shape or it's not an L shape. And every line is exactly the same. And you rent that. So you live vertically. That's kind of like the way most of Web3 is. What Avalanche is, it's like a city with many sovereign houses. So you actually own your own house, and you can design your house and the layout of your house and architect your house the way you desire. So it's horizontal versus vertical. That's the best way to visualize what Avalanche is.
That's a great analogy. Um, so let's get a little bit more into how it's different from other blockchains. You guys have three chains. How do those work together? How
So
does that help you scale?
those are a very tech specific thing. I think for the audience to understand it easier would be the business answer is, the vision of Ava Labs is that there will be a chain for your specific business needs, as long as it's easy, cheap, and fast. And then you as a builder or a developer can, again, like that house, customize it for what you want. What I mean by that is, for instance, performance isolation would be a perfect example. Um, Sometimes when you're on the internet and everyone else in the neighborhood is on the internet, you can't stream fast, or things go down. Or if you're opening a garage door and everyone else in the neighborhood's opening a garage door, you're opening a garage door should not be subject to if everyone else is doing it at the same time. You should be able to do it with your performance isolated. That's one thing that the customizable blockchain allows you to do. It allows you to design the technology for your specific needs as well. Certain apps are high throughput, other apps are low throughput and more dense. So the technology in the app should be designed the way the product needs to be. The customizable Avalanche network allows you, the developer, to do that. Great thing about Web3 is designing economies inside of a blockchain. We see this in the traditional world with gaming companies already. Games like Roblox, if people have kids, they play Roblox, there's an in-game economy. Avalanche allows you to design your in-game economy the way you want it and create a curve the way you desire. And very importantly, traditional finance companies need legal and compliance. They just can't be in a permissionless world very easily. So Avalanche, again, allows you to customize first a permission blockchain with your specific requirements for compliance and regulatory needs. And then if you desire later on to open up and enter the permissionless world, it's very easy to do that. So those are like 4 examples of how the customizable blockchain helps different users and builders.
And so to go a little deeper onto those users, you guys have some interesting partnerships. I think there was something that was announced maybe yesterday or the day before. Talk to us about who's using it.
Okay, so I think this is this is one of the best aspects of Avalanche. The users, developers and users on Avalanche fit, broadly speaking, 2 different worlds. There's the crypto native, creating crypto native applications on chain, but there are also crossover participants, users or developers who are enhancing existing businesses or enhancing existing products with blockchain, allowing them to either have better authenticity, provenance of their asset, or creating in-game economies, things like that. So some of the users could be a Citibank, perfect example. We helped them create a proof of concept for a bilateral swap agreement. The instant finality of Avalanche allows them to settle very quickly. Then there is games like a gaming company called Gonzilla that has a game called Off the Grid. And that game, it has different needs. Games are very fast. They need throughput. It's a different need. Then there is very native crypto Web3 stuff like Dexalot. Dexalot is a on-chain exchange, and so a top 10 one. They have different desires, and those users are very, call it native. So it's very cool that Avalanche has different types of users from all walks of life.
Definitely. And do you want to show us? I like games. Do you want to, if you're able to share your screen, do you want to show us Off the Grid? I like
This
to.
is where we got in trouble in the first place because we tried this and then we couldn't get on. So I'll try my best. Let's see if it works. Hopefully it does.
Are we flying too close to the sun here?
Well, let's give it a shot because it's pretty cool to see this and I can talk about it afterwards. I don't know if the audio will work or not, but let's try it.
A lot of hard work.
See this?
Oh, we finally completed it. And we are ready for our first globally broadcast Battle chance of winning up to $100 million.
Obviously, this is going to attract everyone, not just ex-soldiers.
This is like Hunger Games happening in real life.
Players must undergo surgery in order to play.
They cut off your limbs and they grow back by regen. And then they give you these cybernetic
So I'm gonna end that demo right there. Can you hear me? Just to make
Yeah,
sure it
tell
works.
us a little bit about,
Right.
yeah, we can
So
hear
that
you.
that is the trailer for the game
Yes.
Off the Grid, made by Gunzilla. And I just wanted to show that trailer to show you an audience that this is not your classic Web3 game you saw from 2 or 3 years ago. This is a AAA published type game. The team behind this, Gunzilla, raised over $100 million in order to create this game. Took 2 or 3 years to do it, actually. And it's a huge success. In 2 weeks now, over 8 million wallets have been created, 8.3 or 8.4 to be more exact. It was the #1 game on the Epic platform last weekend, better than Fortnite. I think everyone here probably has heard of Fortnite. For last weekend, at least, it was more popular than Fortnite. Millions and millions of transactions a day from that game. What they've done is now they've created all those things you see in the game, call it, the in-game assets, recuperating your body and all that stuff. Those are basically user-owned assets that can be someday issue-owned in a marketplace inside the game to create even more revenue streams for the Gunzilla team. So they are enhancing the capability of the game, increasing revenue streams by creating a solution on top of the Avalanche blockchain, which they probably could not have done as easily in the single silo database of a traditional Web 2. That's the kind of thing that we are super excited about, enabling existing great products to actually be even better.
And this game, it seems like this is something that is actually contending with like Fortnite. So
it is.
It
was #1
really
last
impressive.
weekend.
That's really impressive. Let's talk about the token. Where does the token fit in? Talk to us about supply, inflation, and how it works in the context of the chain.
Absolutely. So tokens, Vox token, other tokens, the goal is decentralized utility. It is there for many purposes: to secure the network, to pay for gas in order for development or for usage. And in the network of networks on Avalanche, when a third party creates something in their self-sovereign L1, they're effectively paying some sort of small tax, or like going through a gate and you pay a fee in order to use the consensus protocol of Avalanche. And that's how the token is done. In terms of the supply, it is a mint and burn model, but it has a Bitcoin component because it's a finite amount. 720 million is the max that can come out, but it may never even get there because it's burn and mint all the way along that path.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the projects. You've shown that one project. What are some of the other projects or use cases that you're either seeing today or just in the future you would be really excited about for Avalanche?
Well, another one that I'm super excited about, and there's a big category now emerging on Avalanche, a whole vertical, if you will, loyalty and royalty. There are what third-party royalty companies and loyalty companies have figured out. And there's one in particular in the US called Try Your Best, TYB. TYB is a traditional company where they are, for the merchants, they have like Glossier, Rare Beauty, Urban Outfitters, and a whole bunch of other merchants. And the shopping experience is plugged into Shopify. On the user experience, it's plugged into Avalanche, powered by Avalanche, where you can align the engagement tools of their, call it fandom, of these different brands with the incentives of the actual brand itself by rewarding basically users or purchasers of Try Your Best or Glossier lipstick or Urban Outfitter clothing, and allowing a marketplace where those, call it loyalty points, can be exchanged, used from one place to another, but also for sharing their influence and their happiness over a product with other users in the ecosystem and communicate with other people in that platform, they actually earn even more. So what they've done, the numbers are very simple. Using a blockchain-enabled solution versus their traditional solution, they've increased, I think, engagement by close to 20% and spend by 40% for their blockchain-enabled user. That's nice numbers for any brand to hear.
Definitely. Um, and what do you think in terms of just the future? Like, what is the stepping stone? What does mass adoption look like in the intermediate term and the long term?
Um, in the near term, next 2 years or 3 years, I think a lot of things are going to change, especially around stable coins and payments. I think that's going to be unlocked there when we have more clarity as to the rules around stable coins in the US. Um, when that happens, right now there's definitely product market fit on stable coins. According to A16, more stable coins were settled on chain last year than, or 2x that of the Visa network around the world. That's, $8-9 trillion being settled on chain. So there are people using this around the world right now. I think in the near term, when the regulatory clarity happens, uh, transferring value or assets on chain is going to just really take off. That's where the TVL will come from. But what is going to be more exciting and bringing new users in are these games off the grid. 2 weeks, 8 million wallets. I think cumulatively 60 million transactions already. So a lot of usage and new people. These are, 8 million wallets of people, probably very few of them overlap that have already been in Web3. So the usage and the users will come from applications like gaming. And I think the TVL comes from value transfer, tokenizing assets.
So let's talk about, I think, you have done a very good job of explaining everything in a very succinct way. So I think we're ready to take some of the investor questions, which I think are actually, there's some pretty interesting ones here. Um, so what do you tell, and I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but the investors, they've got their Bitcoin exposure, they've got Ethereum in their portfolio. Yes,
I
but
can,
why would there be a compelling, what is the
well, what I can say
Avalanche?
is when I used to be a tech investor, one of the things that I would look at is utility and use cases. Frankly, at first, it was hard for me to understand Bitcoin's use case. Today, it's more obvious to a lot of people. It's a store of value. It's digital gold. It's a replacement of that. I think there are other layer one chains out there, Avalanche being one of them, where there's a lot of utility. Now, and I always look for, when I was a tech investor, things that I can figure out that perhaps others didn't. And I think one of the beautiful things about Avalanche, that the permissionless chain Avalanche, is that there's a lot of transactions. There's so it's a network of networks. There's effectively 135 networks that's in testnet or in private. And those are going to go either live in the next year or so, or they're going to go from, the private ones will always be private, so you can't really count it. But if you start looking at metrics from these test nets that go over to, call it mainnet, the numbers will just be staggering, and it's all going to inflect at one point.
When do you think, so we talked about the burn mechanism, when do you think the Avax will become deflationary?
Oh, I mean, there's a nice curve. I mean, we had advisors who are economists. We hope that it's not too inflationary or deflationary, and it's been set, perfectly. Probably not the best person to answer, but we do have a lot of confidence in our advisors from the early days who set that the curve, if you will.
Okay, and I think we have time for a few more questions, so you guys can continue to send in the questions. Does the speed and cost efficiencies, do the cost and speed efficiencies of L2s threaten Avalanche's market share and use case?
Well, I see a world ultimately where it's interoperable chains all over the place. Now, in L2, that's a great question, because L2 is actually not a self-sovereign blockchain. It is one part of, again, going back to that visual analog, it's part of that vertical tech stack. So I think one of the benefits of that horizontal, own your own house and design it and have the right amount of bathrooms and right amount of living rooms and bedrooms, depending on how many kids you have, is that it allows developers to create better applications so users will want to come over and use it, as opposed to just force yourself into a cookie cutter, hotel room like construct that you rent. So there are different solutions for different purposes. I think L2 is a great complement for L1 if it is really a complement, or they're going to try to vampire the whole situation. But we want to just focus on creating great solutions for developers. Avalanche is EVM compatible, so we play nice with everyone and think assets can move back and forth. Not only are all these L1s interoperable with themselves, they're, ultimately it's EVM compatible. Assets can move back and forth at Ethereum. So it's so early that I know people like to think about things, us versus them, but there's, a few 100,000, if that many developers in this space. There's 3 million on iOS and like 8-9 million on Android and 50 to 70 million on the web. That's the real goal here, is to get those developers over. And this is what we're doing at Ava Labs to help Avalanche get those crossover developers.
And I think that's an interesting point. I think we can dig into that a little bit, because people don't really talk a lot about the role of necessarily like the programming language in terms of being something that people are used to working with, or it's easy to learn. So do you want to just kind of lay that out for folks, just why that matters in terms
Well,
of
it matters
attracting
especially
folks?
if you want to get the crossover application. Even if it's easy to, first of all, they don't have engineers and developers that understand Web3 tech development, if you will. Not that it's impossible to learn, the language used to program on blockchains or smart contracts or anything, but like they just don't want to bother with it. So what you need is a company like Ava Labs, kind of like Red Hat was for Linux, that helps them create and helps them integrate into the blockchain. Again, the great thing about Ava Labs or Avalanche is that we really want to support not just developers in crypto native, but the crossover developers. And this is why we are happy to help out and create the software and services necessary, the tools necessary, so that traditional developers come over. I think we do a great service for the whole space, frankly, at Ava Labs, because we have to grow this pie. And if you're not creating, relationships with crossover enabled products and companies and features with traditional Web 2 or TradFi, you're never going to get more adoption and go up the adoption curve.
Yeah, I think that's important. So when we think about product development, for me, I think about themes and what is needed, like what is really the stepping stone to actually mass adoption and to people actually using blockchains, and for these kind of transcending to beyond just having an investment purpose, and it just abstraction, um, ease of use, the ability
I
to
mean,
onboard folks
we
easily.
didn't get to go into the finish the last question you had, which is basically short-term and long-term horizon. I think the long-term horizon, the dream for it should be the dream is that complete abstracting away a blockchain-enabled solution behind the scene. It's going to be powered by Avalanche or Intel Inside kind of thing. You look at that trailer for Off the Grid; it's a world-class game. You have no idea that behind the scenes, it's powered by Avalanche for a lot of the asset trading. So that's the ultimate long-term goal here.
The goal being that people are interacting with the technology and using the platforms without even knowing that they're interacting with blockchain or crypto.
That's the long-term goal. That's right.
Talk a little bit about Visa and who's using that and how
Oh,
that's going to work.
so you saw that
I
announcement
did.
it was by Rain. Rain is a third-party company. They are what they call a preferred client of Visa. You're going to have to ask them what they have to accomplish to be preferred at Visa. But in the geographies where they have the right money transmittal licenses or where they comply, basically they've integrated Avalanche so you can use it in a normal credit card manner to pay for things using crypto, including Avalanche. And that's just an example how ultimately this, digital open native internet financial system can work without intermediaries. Um, I think somewhere in one of those questions is what needs to happen in the next few years for that ubiquity and mass adoption. I think Ava Labs is working on creating a better developer experience so they can deploy their own application on their own chains. The better UI UX needs to be out there for the users. So they need to, similar to what you guys did. We're all hoping for some certainty in the rules in the US. And when that happens, that mass adoption will happen, and that you're going to see the inflection point really happen.
Well, this is great. I don't think we have any more questions from folks, but again, a testament to how succinctly you covered everything. And I really appreciate the analogies. I think that resonates well with an audience who isn't necessarily as deep into crypto. So thank you again for joining me. And thanks everybody for watching. Have a
Ray,
great
thank
rest
you.
of your day.